The silent observers, the Galactic Assembly Hall stretched across an entire moon, a monument to power that had taken 3 centuries to construct. The structure defied natural laws, its walls made of compressed starlight, its foundation anchored in the fabric of space itself. Inside, the chamber could hold 10,000 beings comfortably, though only the most powerful species in the known universe were permitted entry. The hall was arranged in concentric circles, each ring representing a tier of strength, influence, and respect earned through conquest, technology, or sheer survival against impossible odds. The innermost circle belonged to the Chromath Empire. These beings stood 4 meters tall, their exoskeletons gleaming like polished obsidian. Each Chromath warrior possessed strength capable of tearing through reinforced titanium with bare claws. Their empire spanned 200 star systems, conquered over 8,000 years of continuous expansion. When a Chromath spoke, the chamber fell silent. When they moved, others stepped aside. Their position at the center was not given but taken, defended in 3 separate challenges over the millennia, each time emerging victorious with overwhelming force. Beside them sat the Luminary Collective, beings of pure thought housed in crystalline forms that pulsed with inner light. The Luminary had transcended physical limitations 2 million years ago, achieving a state of existence that allowed them to manipulate matter with consciousness alone. They could collapse stars, redirect asteroids, and communicate across galaxies instantaneously. Their technology was indistinguishable from magic to lesser species. They had never been defeated in combat because combat against them was impossible. How could one fight an enemy that existed in 11 dimensions simultaneously? The Torvan swarm occupied the next position, a hive species that functioned as a single massive intelligence distributed across trillions of individual bodies. They could overwhelm any defense through sheer numbers, adapting and evolving in real time to counter any threat. The Torvan had consumed 40 species throughout their expansion, not out of malice but out of necessity. They required resources, and they took them with methodical efficiency. Their ships blocked out suns when they arrived in force. Row after row of powerful civilizations filled the inner circles. The Paraxians, living plasma beings who existed at temperatures that would vaporize most matter. The Graviton Lords, who bent space itself to their will. The Chronos Syndicate, who had mastered limited time manipulation. Each species had earned their position through demonstrated superiority, through survival in a galaxy that destroyed the weak without mercy. And then, in the outermost ring, barely visible from the center, sat humanity. Dr. Elena Vasquez adjusted her position in the uncomfortable seat designed for species twice her size. She was humanity's lead representative, chosen for her expertise in xenobiology and her diplomatic experience. At 53 years old, her hair had grayed at the temples, and her eyes carried the weight of someone who had seen too much political maneuvering. Beside her sat the rest of Earth's delegation, 20 individuals representing a planet of 8 billion souls. They wore simple gray uniforms, nothing ornate, nothing intimidating. They carried data pads and recording devices, taking notes like students in a lecture hall. The Chromath representative, a general named Tharkun, turned his massive head to survey the outer rings. His voice boomed across the chamber, amplified by technology that ensured every word reached every ear. I see the latest additions to our assembly have found their appropriate place. Tell me, humans, how does it feel to sit so far from relevance? Can you even hear the important discussions from back there? Or should we install additional speakers? Laughter rippled through the inner circles. The Paraxians flickered with amusement. Even the normally stoic Luminari pulsed with what might have been mirth. Elena did not react. She simply made a note on her data pad and continued listening to the assembly proceedings. Commander Vex of the Torvan swarm spoke next, his voice a chorus of 1,000 smaller voices speaking in perfect unison. In the 300 cycles since humanity joined our assembly, what have they contributed? Their ships are slow, barely capable of crossing a single sector in reasonable time. Their weapons cannot penetrate basic shielding. Their biology is so fragile that most environments kill them without intervention. Perhaps they should have remained on their single world, dreaming of stars they could never reach. A Graviton Lord named Orzak added his perspective, his words bending reality slightly as he spoke. They possess no unique abilities, no enhanced strength, no mental powers, no technological superiority. They are, by all measurable standards, the weakest species to ever gain assembly membership. One wonders why we permitted their inclusion at all. Elena felt the tension in her fellow delegates. Lieutenant Marcus Chen, the military liaison, had his jaw clenched. Dr. Sarah Morrison, the physicist, looked down at her hands. Ambassador James Okonkwo, usually unflappable, shifted uncomfortably. But Elena raised a hand slightly, a subtle gesture that meant the same thing it always meant. Wait, observe, say nothing. The assembly moved on to the day's primary agenda. Reports had been flooding in from the outer territories, from the edge of explored space where the assembly's influence grew thin. Ships were disappearing, not destroyed, not captured, simply vanishing without trace or warning. Entire outposts had gone silent overnight. Automated probes sent to investigate never returned. The phenomenon had a name now, whispered with growing concern: the quantum storm. General Tharkin stood, his massive form dominating the center of the chamber. The Chromath Empire will handle this threat. We have faced countless enemies, vanquished countless challenges. Whatever this quantum storm may be, it will fall before our might. We will dispatch our 4th Fleet, 300 warships carrying 50,000 of our finest warriors. This matter will be resolved within 2 cycles. The luminary representative, a being called Essence of Dawn, pulsed thoughtfully. The Chromath approach is predictably direct. However, this phenomenon appears to be of a quantum nature. Perhaps a more sophisticated response is required. The luminary shall send our science vessels to study this anomaly. Our understanding of higher dimensional physics far exceeds conventional warfare. We will unravel this mystery and neutralize the threat through knowledge rather than brute force. Commander Vex buzzed with confidence. The Torvin Swarm offers our adaptive capabilities. Send us to the affected regions. We will analyze, evolve, and overcome. No phenomenon has ever resisted our collective intelligence. We are change itself, and we will change to meet this challenge. One by one, the powerful species volunteered their forces, each confident in their unique superiority. The Paraxians would burn away any matter causing the disturbance. The Graviton Lords would stabilize space itself. The Chronos Syndicate would investigate temporal anomalies. Plans were made, fleets were assigned, and glory was anticipated. The Assembly leader, an ancient luminary who had witnessed the rise and fall of civilizations, turned its attention to the outer rings. And what of our peripheral members? Will the lesser species contribute to this defense, or will you watch from safety while your betters protect you? Elena stood slowly. Her voice was calm, measured, carrying none of the bombast of the inner circle species. Humanity will send observer ships to the affected regions. We will provide support, rescue operations if needed, and documentation of the phenomenon. Our vessels will remain at safe distances and will not interfere with primary operations. Tharkin laughed, a sound like grinding stone. Observer ships, of course. What else could humans do but watch? Very well, little species, you may observe. Perhaps you will learn something about true power before you die of old age in your slow, fragile ships. The Assembly voted. The plan was approved. The Chromath 4th Fleet would engage first, supported by Luminary science vessels and Torvin adaptive forces. Other species would provide secondary support. Humanity would observe from a distance, as always, irrelevant and ignored. As the assembly adjourned, Elena gathered her delegation. They walked through corridors that had been designed for beings much larger than themselves, feeling like children in a world built by giants. Lieutenant Chen finally spoke, his voice tight with frustration. How long are we going to let them mock us? We have capabilities they don't understand. We have strategies they've never considered. Why do we sit in the back and take their insults? Elena stopped walking and turned to face her team. They were in a private corridor now, away from the sensors and ears of other species. Marcus, tell me what you see when you look at the Chromath. Chen frowned. I see a species that's won every war through overwhelming force. Brutal, effective, and arrogant about it. And the Luminari? Advanced beyond anything we can currently comprehend. They think in dimensions we can barely theorize about. The Torvin? A hive mind that adapts faster than individual thinking allows. Terrifying in its efficiency, Elena nodded. Now tell me, in all the wars Earth has fought, all the conflicts humanity has survived, when did we win by being the strongest? The delegation was quiet. Dr. Morrison spoke softly. We've never been the strongest. Not against nature, not against predators when we were evolving, not even against each other in our own wars. Exactly, Elena said. Humanity has survived for 300,000 years, not because we were mighty, but because we were smart. We watched the saber-toothed cats and learned their patterns. We studied the weather and learned to predict storms. We observed our enemies in war and learned their tactics before engaging. Every advantage we've ever gained came from understanding first and acting second. Ambassador Okonkwo leaned against the wall. So we sit in the back and let them fail first. We sit in the back and learn from their failures, Elena corrected. The Chromath will attack with force. The Luminary will approach with theoretical physics. The Torvin will try to adapt in real time, and we will watch every moment, record every outcome, and understand what works and what doesn't, before we risk a single human life unnecessarily. Chen looked uncertain. And if they succeed? If they solve this problem without us? Elena smiled slightly. Then we learned how to solve it without risking anything. But Marcus, look at the pattern. Every species in that chamber approaches problems the same way they've always approached problems. The Chromath with violence, the Luminary with theory, the Torvin with adaptation. They're predictable because they've never needed to be anything else. Their strength has always been enough. Until it isn't, Dr. Morrison said quietly. Until it isn't, Elena agreed. And when that moment comes, when strength and knowledge and adaptation all fail, humanity will be ready with a solution they never considered because they were too busy being strong to think about being clever. The delegation continued to their quarters, a modest section of the station allocated to species of minor importance. As they walked, Elena thought about Earth, about the long journey humanity had taken from a single world to the stars. They had not conquered their way to space. They had not transcended physical limitations. They had simply been patient, careful, and persistent. They had learned from every failure, adapted to every setback, and survived when species far mightier had fallen to their own arrogance. In the assembly hall, the inner circles prepared for war against the quantum storm. Ships were launched. Warriors were armed, and confidence was absolute. No one paid attention to the small human vessels that quietly departed toward the affected regions, their sensors recording everything, their crews taking notes. The Chromath Fourth Fleet arrived at the edge of the quantum storm 3 cycles later. The phenomenon was unlike anything they had encountered. Space itself seemed to fold and unfold in impossible patterns, creating zones where physics operated under different rules. Matter would exist and not exist simultaneously. Time flowed backward in some areas, forward in others, and not at all in still others. It was chaos given form, entropy made visible. General Tharkin stood on the bridge of his flagship, the Unbreakable Dawn, and surveyed the phenomenon through enhanced sensors. His warriors stood ready, weapons charged, shields at maximum. This is nothing we cannot overcome. All ships advance formation. We will push through this anomaly and restore order to this region of space. The fleet advanced. 300 warships, each one capable of destroying a moon, moved into the quantum storm with perfect military precision. For the first hour, everything proceeded as expected. The shields held against the strange energies. The ships maintained formation. Tharkin allowed himself a moment of satisfaction. Another challenge overcome through superior strength. Then the first ship simply ceased to exist. One moment the cruiser Valor's Edge was reporting normal operations. The next moment it was gone. Not destroyed, not damaged. It had simply stopped being. The space it had occupied was empty, as if the ship had never existed at all. Tharkin ordered the fleet to halt, but the command came too late. More ships began vanishing, reality itself rejecting their presence in this space. The Chromath tried everything. They increased shield power, but the phenomenon ignored energy barriers. They fired weapons at the anomalies, but the weapons vanished with their targets. They attempted to retreat, but found that space had somehow closed behind them. In 6 hours, the Chromath Fourth Fleet lost 90 ships and 20,000 warriors. The survivors fled back to normal space, broken and confused. The Luminary science vessels approached next with confidence born from millions of years of existence. Essence of Dawn led a team of the most brilliant minds in the galaxy, beings who had published theories that reshaped understanding of reality itself. They would not make the Chromath mistake of applying force to a problem that required understanding. Their vessels moved carefully into the phenomenon, every sensor active, recording data at speeds that would overwhelm conventional computers. The Luminary minds processed information in parallel, testing hypotheses in microseconds. They identified quantum fluctuations, dimensional breaches, and temporal anomalies. They developed 17 different theoretical models to explain the quantum storm's behavior. Each model was elegant, mathematically sound, and completely useless. The phenomenon did not follow their theories. It operated under principles that seemed to violate fundamental physics, yet clearly existed. When the luminary attempted to stabilize the quantum fluctuations, the fluctuations intensified. When they tried to seal dimensional breaches, new breaches opened. Their greatest minds, their most advanced theories, meant nothing against something that refused to obey the laws. They had spent eons mastering after losing 3 science vessels and witnessing 12 luminary minds essentially cease to function from attempting to comprehend the incomprehensible. The luminary withdrew. Essence of dawn, for the first time in its existence spanning multiple galactic rotations, admitted uncertainty. The Torvan swarm arrived with absolute confidence in their adaptive capabilities. They had survived everything the galaxy could create by simply evolving faster than threats could destroy them. The quantum storm would be no different. Commander Vex led trillions of individual bodies into the phenomenon, each one a node in the vast collective intelligence. At first, adaptation seemed to work. Bodies that were destroyed in one region of the storm were replaced by bodies modified to survive those conditions. The swarm learned and evolved in real time exactly as designed. But the quantum storm was not static. It changed faster than the Torvan could adapt, creating new conditions before the swarm could adjust to old ones. Worse, the phenomenon began to fragment the collective intelligence, isolating groups of bodies from the larger mind. Without connection to the whole, individual Torvan were nearly mindless. Trillions of bodies found themselves suddenly alone, unable to communicate, unable to coordinate, unable to function. The swarm that entered the quantum storm was a unified intelligence. The swarm that emerged was scattered fragments, confused and diminished. Commander Vex withdrew what remained of his forces, having lost more bodies in 6 hours than the Torvan had lost in 1,000 years of warfare. One by one, the mighty species of the inner circles attempted solutions. The Paraxians found their plasma forms destabilized by the quantum fluctuations. The Graviton Lords discovered that the storm resisted gravitational manipulation. The Chrono Syndicate's time manipulation devices malfunctioned catastrophically, aging some ships thousands of years in seconds, while others were sent backward in time and destroyed by past versions of themselves. Every approach failed. Every theory proved insufficient. Every display of power was meaningless. The quantum storm continued to expand, consuming more systems, threatening to reach the core territories of the assembly. Panic began to replace confidence in the inner circles. And at the edge of the storm, human ships continued their observations. They maintained safe distances, rescued survivors when possible, and recorded everything. 30 human vessels, small and unremarkable, filled their databases with information that would take years to fully analyze. The crews worked in shifts, never sleeping long, driven by the knowledge that somewhere in all this data might be something important. Dr. Elena Vasquez reviewed reports in her quarters aboard the research vessel Curiosity. They had been observing for 40 days now, and patterns were beginning to emerge. Patterns that the Chromath had missed because they attacked immediately. Patterns the Luminari had overlooked because they fit no existing theory. Patterns the Torvan could not see because adaptation required action, not patience. Lieutenant Chen entered with the latest analysis. We've processed the quantum signatures from 17 different regions of the storm. There's a correlation, Elena. It's subtle, but it's there. Elena studied the data, her experienced eyes finding the connections. It's not random. It's not chaos. It's something else entirely. Should we report this to the assembly? Elena considered. Not yet. We need to be certain. If we're wrong, we waste their time and confirm their opinion that we're irrelevant. But if we're right? She paused, thinking about all the powerful species that had failed. If we're right, we might save everyone by doing what we do best. What's that? Sitting in the back and paying attention. The revelation, the emergency session of the Galactic Assembly convened under circumstances no one had anticipated. The chamber that usually buzzed with confident declarations and displays of superiority now held a different energy entirely. Fear had crept into the inner circles, and with it came something the mighty species rarely experienced: doubt. The quantum storm had expanded beyond all projections, consuming 14 star systems completely, and destabilizing 23 more. Billions of lives had been evacuated, but millions had been lost when entire planets simply phased out of normal space. General Tharkin stood at the center of the chamber. His massive form somehow diminished despite no physical change. His voice, usually booming with certainty, carried a note of something unfamiliar. The Chromath Empire has exhausted conventional military solutions. We have lost 417 ships in total across multiple engagement attempts. Every tactical approach has failed. Whatever this phenomenon is, it cannot be conquered through force of arms. Essence of dawn pulsed with subdued light. The Luminari representatives' usual brilliance dimmed by the weight of failure. The Luminari Collective must also report lack of progress. We have deployed our most advanced theoretical models, consulted archives spanning millions of years, and engaged our greatest minds in analysis. The quantum storm operates outside all known principles of physics. It is not simply unknown, it is fundamentally unknowable by our current methods. We cannot solve a problem that refuses to follow the rules we understand. Commander Vex spoke next, his unified voice now carrying dissonant notes, evidence of the damage his collective consciousness had sustained. The Torvan swarm attempted adaptive evolution across 47 separate engagements. In each case, the phenomenon changed faster than our evolution could track. We lost 2 trillion bodies, and our collective intelligence has been fragmented in ways we are still struggling to repair. Adaptation requires time to observe and adjust. The storm does not provide that time. One by one, the species of the inner circles reported their failures. The Paraxians had lost containment vessels when the storm's energies disrupted their plasma cohesion fields. The Graviton Lords found their space-bending abilities reversed, crushing their own ships. The Chronos Syndicate had suffered temporal paradoxes that erased entire lineages from existence. Every demonstration of power, every application of advanced knowledge, every evolutionary advantage had proven insufficient. The Assembly leader's crystalline form pulsed with deep concern. We face a crisis unlike any in recorded history. The storm expands at an accelerating rate. At current progression, it will reach the core systems within 150 cycles. We must find a solution, or we must evacuate entire sectors of the galaxy. The question before this assembly is simple. Does anyone have anything new to offer? Any approach we have not yet attempted? Silence filled the chamber. The mighty species looked at each other, searching for answers in faces that reflected their own uncertainty. For the first time in millennia, the inner circles had no solution, no confidence, no clear path forward. From the outer ring, Dr. Elena Vasquez stood. Her movement was small, but in the heavy silence, everyone noticed. She began walking down from her seat, moving through the concentric circles toward the center. This had never happened before. Species from the outer rings did not approach the inner circles without invitation, yet no one stopped her. Perhaps they were too stunned by the breach of protocol, or perhaps they were simply desperate enough to allow it. Elena reached the central platform where only the most powerful voices typically spoke. She carried a data storage device, compact but containing 40 days of continuous observation. Her voice when she spoke was calm and clear, trained through decades of diplomatic service to Project Confidence without arrogance. The human delegation requests permission to present findings regarding the quantum storm phenomenon, General. Tharkin's response carried irritation mixed with curiosity. The humans? You have been at the edge of the storm this entire time. Doing what exactly? Watching? Recording? What could you possibly have learned that we, with our superior capabilities, have not already discovered? Elena met his gaze without flinching. With respect, General, we learned precisely because we were watching and recording. We learned because we did not immediately engage. We learned because we are not superior. The chamber erupted in confused murmurs. Several species began speaking at once, but the assembly leader pulsed for silence. Explain yourself, human, quickly. We have little time for riddles. Elena activated the data device and holographic displays filled the chamber's center, visible from every ring. The images showed the quantum storm from multiple angles, recorded across 40 days of continuous observation. Every species here approached the storm according to your greatest strengths. The Chromath applied military might. The Luminari applied theoretical knowledge. The Torvan applied adaptive evolution. Each approach failed not because you were weak, but because you were strong in ways the storm could counter. She zoomed in on specific sections of the recordings. The phenomenon responds to engagement. When the chromath attacked with weapons, the storm created zones where weapons simply ceased to function. When the luminary attempted to apply theoretical models, the storm violated those theories specifically. When the Torvin tried to adapt, the storm changed faster than adaptation could occur. It's as if the storm identifies the nature of each threat and develops specific counters. Tharkin growled deep in his throat. We observe this ourselves. We know it adapts. Tell us something useful, human, or stop wasting our time. Elena continued calmly. The useful information, General, is what the storm does not respond to. Our ships approached within sensor range but did not engage aggressively. We used passive scanning only, no active probes. We made no attempt to alter the storm, control it, or fight it. And the storm ignored us completely. For 40 days, we have operated in proximity to the phenomenon without a single incident of hostility. Essence of Dawn pulsed with interest. You are suggesting the storm distinguishes between different types of interaction? That it responds to perceived threats but ignores passive observation? More than that, Elena said, pulling up additional data. The storm is not random chaos. It has structure, patterns that repeat across multiple regions. But these patterns only become visible when observed over extended periods without interference. Every time someone tries to engage the storm, the patterns shift and reform. The storm is not attacking randomly. It's defending itself against specific types of interaction. Dr. Sarah Morrison, the human physicist, stood from the outer ring and spoke up, her voice carrying across the chamber. We analyzed quantum signatures across 17 different regions over 40 days. The storm operates on principles that seem to violate conventional physics, but only when measured using active scanning methods. When we use completely passive observation, we detect underlying mathematical structures that are actually quite elegant. She transmitted additional data to the displays. Complex equations filled the air, but these were unlike anything the luminary had proposed. The storm exists in a state of quantum superposition across multiple probability states simultaneously. Active observation, active engagement, forces the storm to collapse into specific states, but each collapse is temporary and triggers a defensive response. The storm essentially fights back against anything that tries to force it into a single reality. Commander Vex buzzed thoughtfully. You are describing a quantum observer effect on a massive scale. But how does this help us? If we cannot interact with the storm without triggering defense mechanisms, we cannot stop its expansion. Lieutenant Marcus Chen stood next, his military bearing evident even at a distance. That's where our analysis diverges from conventional thinking. We don't need to stop the storm. We need to guide it. The storm isn't malevolent. It's reactive. It responds to how we approach it. The chromath approached with violence, so the storm became violent. The luminary approached with theoretical certainty, so the storm became theoretically impossible. Everyone tried to impose their will on the phenomenon. Elena resumed speaking. Humanity's experience with quantum mechanics taught us something fundamental. Observation affects reality at the quantum level. The storm is essentially quantum mechanics operating at a galactic scale. The more we try to control it, the more unpredictable it becomes. But if we change our approach, if we work with the storm rather than against it, we might be able to guide it toward states that are not hostile. General Tharkun stepped forward, his massive form towering over Elena. You are asking the chromath to not fight? To not defend? Our entire civilization is built on strength and conquest. We do not surrender to phenomena or enemies. I'm not asking you to surrender, Elena said quietly. I'm asking you to use your strength differently. General, your ships are powerful. They can withstand tremendous stress. What if instead of attacking the storm, you use that strength to create stable zones? Anchor points where space remains normal? Not as weapons, but as foundations? She turned to Essence of Dawn. The luminary understand dimensional physics better than anyone. Instead of trying to explain the storm using existing theories, what if you used your knowledge to create dimensional bridges, safe passages through the storm rather than attempts to eliminate it? To Commander Vex, the Torvin swarm can adapt and evolve. Instead of fighting the storm's changes, what if you evolve to exist peacefully alongside it, become a presence the storm doesn't perceive as a threat? Elena addressed the entire chamber. Every species here has incredible abilities, but you've all approached this crisis the same way you approach every crisis, by trying to dominate it, understand it completely, or evolve past it. The storm responds to those approaches because they're all forms of aggression from its perspective. Humanity doesn't have those overwhelming strengths, so we never triggered those defensive responses. We simply watched, and in watching we learned. Ambassador James Okonkwo stood now, his diplomatic experience evident in his measured words. We are proposing a coordinated effort unlike anything the Assembly has attempted. Each species contributes their unique strengths, but not in ways you've used them before. The Chromath provides stability instead of destruction. The Luminari create paths instead of explanations. The Torvan become peaceful neighbors instead of adapters, and humanity coordinates the effort, because we have the most experience operating from positions of weakness. The chamber fell silent as the implications settled over the assembled species. The Assembly leader pulsed thoughtfully, its ancient consciousness processing the proposal. You are asking the most powerful species in the galaxy to act weak, to approach a threat with passivity rather than strength. This goes against every instinct, every tradition, every principle that earned us our positions in this assembly. Elena nodded. Yes, I understand how difficult this is. Your strength has served you well for millions of years. But this crisis requires a different kind of strength. The strength to not act immediately. The strength to observe before engaging. The strength to work together in ways that feel unnatural. Humanity has practiced this kind of strength for our entire existence because we've never had the luxury of overwhelming power. We've always had to be clever, patient, and cooperative to survive. General Tharkin was quiet for a long moment, his warrior's mind wrestling with concepts that contradicted everything he had been trained to believe. Finally, he spoke. The Chromath have lost 400 ships and thousands of warriors because we did what we always do. We attacked. We conquered. We failed, perhaps. He paused, the word clearly difficult. Perhaps there is wisdom in the human approach. If the alternative is watching the galaxy be consumed, then the Chromath will try something new. We will provide your stable zones. Essence of Dawn pulsed with what might have been acceptance. The Luminari have existed for millions of years because we were willing to learn new things, explore new concepts. This human proposal is certainly new. We will create dimensional bridges, though the concept of working without complete theoretical understanding troubles us deeply. Commander Vex buzzed in agreement. The Torvan swarm evolved to survive. If peaceful coexistence is the evolution required now, then we will adapt to peace, though it may be the strangest adaptation we have ever attempted. One by one, the species of the inner circles agreed, some reluctantly, some with genuine curiosity, but all with the recognition that their traditional approaches had failed. The outer ring species watched in amazement as the most powerful beings in the galaxy accepted guidance from the weakest. The assembly leader made it formal. The human proposal is accepted. Dr. Elena Vasquez will coordinate operations. All species will contribute according to the outlined plan. We have 150 cycles before the storm reaches core systems. We begin immediately. Elena felt the weight of every gaze in the chamber upon her. She had spent 300 years of human spaceflight preparing for this moment without knowing it. Every diplomatic negotiation, every careful observation, every patient analysis had led to this point where the galaxy needed someone who knew how to operate from the back row. The operation began within cycles. Chromath ships, their weapons powered down, moved into position at the storm's edge. Instead of firing on the phenomenon, they activated their most powerful structural integrity fields, creating zones of stable space. It went against every warrior instinct, but they held position, providing anchors rather than attacks. To their amazement, the storm's expansion slowed in those areas. The phenomenon seemed almost to flow around the stable zones rather than destroying them. Luminari vessels worked in coordination with the Chromath anchors, using their dimensional understanding to create pathways through the storm. These were not attempts to control or explain the phenomenon, but rather careful routes that worked with the storm's natural patterns rather than against them. The Luminari found that when they stopped trying to impose theoretical frameworks and instead observed and adapted to what the storm naturally did, they could guide its energy in non-destructive directions. The Torvan swarm dispersed throughout the affected regions in a completely new configuration. Instead of forming aggressive attack formations or adaptive combat groups, they spread out as peaceful observers. Individual Torvan bodies simply existed near the storm, not trying to change it, not attempting to fight it, just being present. The storm's expansion rate decreased further, The phenomenon seemed to recognize the Torvan not as threats to be countered, but as part of the environment to coexist with. Human ships coordinated everything from their position at the operation's edge. They monitored quantum signatures, tracked pattern changes, and adjusted the positions of all species' contributions in real time. Elena worked with a dedicated team, functioning as a central nervous system for an effort that involved hundreds of ships and dozens of species. The data flowed through human systems, analyzed by minds trained to see patterns in weakness rather than strength. 50 cycles into the operation, measurable progress emerged. The storm's expansion had slowed by 60%. More importantly, the phenomenon's energy signatures began showing signs of stabilization. The chaotic quantum fluctuations that had defined the storm were organizing into more predictable patterns. It was as if the storm, no longer being fought, was settling into a less aggressive state. General Tharkin reported from his flagship, positioned at one of the primary anchor points. "Human coordinator, this is the strangest campaign I have ever participated in. My ships hold position and do nothing but exist. Yet I see results. The storm does not attack us when we do not attack it. There is honor in this, though it is an honor I do not fully understand." Essence of Dawn transmitted similar observations. The dimensional pathways remain stable beyond all predictions. When we stopped trying to explain why they work and simply allowed them to exist, they became permanent. The storm flows through them like water through channels we have created without forcing. It is humbling to realize that our need for complete understanding was itself the obstacle. Commander Vex offered the most surprising commentary. The Torvan swarm has existed as conquerors and adapters for thousands of generations. We never considered that peaceful coexistence might be the ultimate adaptation. The storm has taught us that survival sometimes means not changing, but accepting. 100 cycles into the operation, the quantum storm stopped expanding entirely. More remarkably, it began to contract. The phenomenon was not being destroyed or dispersed, but rather organizing itself into stable structures that no longer threatened inhabited space. The storm was becoming part of the galaxy's natural fabric, a feature of space-time rather than a destructive anomaly. 130 cycles after implementation, the crisis was declared resolved. The quantum storm existed still, but in controlled regions accessible through the luminary pathways, stabilized by the chromath anchors, and monitored by the Torvan observers. Scientists from across the galaxy could now study the phenomenon safely. Some theorized it might even become useful, a source of exotic energy or a natural laboratory for quantum research. The Galactic Assembly convened again, this time under very different circumstances. The chamber's energy had transformed from fear and doubt to something more complex, a mixture of relief, humility, and reluctant respect. Elena Vasquez stood again at the center of the chamber, but this time she had been invited to that position. The assembly leader's crystalline form pulsed with what might have been the closest thing to gratitude a luminary could express. The human approach has saved the galaxy from a threat that our combined might could not overcome. The assembly must acknowledge that strength takes many forms, and the form we most needed was one we had consistently undervalued. General Tharkin stepped forward, and in a gesture that shocked everyone present, he bowed his massive head toward Elena. For a chromath warrior to bow to anyone was unprecedented. The humans taught the chromath something we believed impossible, that there is strength in patience, power in observation, and victory in cooperation. We have sat in the front row for thousands of years, believing our position reflected our superiority. Perhaps we were simply sitting where everyone could watch us make mistakes first. Essence of Dawn pulsed in agreement. The Luminari have existed for millions of years. Believing our longevity proved the correctness of our approach. Yet a species that has existed in space for merely 300 years understood something we did not. That knowledge comes from questions, not from certainty. The humans sat in the back and asked the questions we had forgotten to consider. Commander Vex buzzed thoughtfully. The Torvan swarm adapts to survive, but we adapted only to threats we recognized. The humans recognized a different kind of threat, the danger of approaching every problem the same way. They sat in the back not because they were weak, but because the back row offered the best view of everyone else's patterns. The assembly leader continued. Therefore, this assembly proposes a restructuring. The seating arrangement has served us for millennia, but perhaps it has also limited us. We propose that seating be determined not by demonstrations of power, but by rotation. Each session, different species occupy different positions. The strong will learn to see from the back. The weak will learn to speak from the center. We will all learn that perspective matters as much as capability. The vote was unanimous. For the first time in the Assembly's history, change came not from conquest or evolution, but from recognition that old systems had limitations. The mighty species of the inner circles accepted that their position had blinded them to approaches they needed. The species of the outer rings learned that their observations from the periphery held value the powerful had overlooked. As the assembly adjourned, General Tharkin approached Elena directly. Up close, his massive form was even more intimidating, but his voice carried genuine respect. "Human Elena, I mocked your people when you first took your seats in the back. I called you weak. I implied you were cowards. I was wrong," Elena smiled slightly. "You weren't entirely wrong, General. We are weak compared to you. We are slow, fragile, and limited. We sit in the back because in direct confrontation, we would lose to almost any species here, but we've learned that the view from the back shows you things the front row misses." "What things?" Tharkin asked. "Patterns, mistakes, opportunities. When you're in front, everyone watches you, expects you to have answers, demands that you act. There's pressure to do something immediately, even if you don't fully understand the situation. But from the back, you can watch, learn, and choose the right moment to contribute. The front row acts first. The back row acts wisely." Tharkin considered this. Perhaps the Chromath would benefit from spending time in the back row, learning to observe before attacking, thinking before conquering. And perhaps humanity would benefit from time in the front row, Elena admitted, learning what it's like to be watched, to have pressure to act immediately, to bear the weight of expectations. Every position in that chamber teaches different lessons. We're all stronger when we learn from every perspective. Lieutenant Chen joined them, along with Dr. Morrison and Ambassador Okonkwo. The human delegation had grown over the past 150 cycles, earning respect through competence rather than power. Chen spoke carefully, aware he was addressing a being who could literally crush him. "General, what will the Chromath do now? Now that the crisis is over?" Tharkin looked back toward the assembly chamber, where species were mingling in ways they never had before. Chromath warriors conversed with luminary scholars. Torvan subgroups interacted peacefully with species they had once conquered. The rigid hierarchy that had defined the assembly for millennia was already beginning to blur. "We will do what warriors do," Tharkin said. "We will learn new ways to fight, not against enemies but against our own limitations. We will practice the strength of patience. We will train in the power of observation. We will become warriors who think before we strike." He paused. "It will be very difficult. It goes against everything we are. But the Chromath do not fear difficulty. We thrive on challenge. And you humans have shown us a challenge worth facing, becoming stronger by acknowledging weakness." As the human delegation returned to their quarters, Elena reflected on everything that had happened. Humanity had come to the stars 300 years ago, late to a galaxy already filled with mighty civilizations. They had been assigned to the back row, dismissed as weak, mocked for their limitations. And they had accepted that position, not with resentment but with patience, knowing that every position offered opportunities for those wise enough to recognize them. The quantum storm had been a crisis unlike any the galaxy had faced, but it had also been an opportunity. An opportunity for the strong to learn humility, for the certain to discover doubt, for the aggressive to understand patience. And humanity, from their position in the back row, had been perfectly placed to see what others missed. That solving problems required more than power. It required perspective. Dr. Morrison looked out the viewport at the assembled fleet. Hundreds of ships from dozens of species, all working together in ways that would have been unthinkable before the crisis. "Do you think this will last?" she asked. "This cooperation, this new understanding?" Elena considered the question carefully. Some species will drift back to old patterns. Power is comfortable for those who possess it, but enough will remember. The Chromath will remember that patience saved them. The Luminari will remember that questions matter more than answers. The Torvan will remember that evolution includes learning peace. And all of them will remember that the species sitting quietly in the back were the ones who solved the problem the mighty couldn't. So humanity stays in the back row? Chen asked. For now, Elena said. The back row suits us. It's where we learn best, where we see clearest, where we think deepest. Maybe someday we'll be strong enough to sit in the front, but strength without wisdom is just power waiting to fail. Wisdom comes from watching, learning, and understanding before you act. The back row teaches wisdom, and right now that's exactly where we need to be. The human ships prepared to depart, returning to Earth to share the story of how the weakest species saved the strongest. But they would return to the assembly, taking their seats in whatever position rotation assigned them, ready to learn from every perspective the galaxy offered. Because humanity had learned long ago, back when they were prey animals on a dangerous world, that survival belonged not to the strongest or the smartest alone, but to those who could observe, adapt, and work together. The galaxy had learned that lesson too, finally taught by the species everyone had dismissed. And from the back row, humanity smiled and took notes, already observing, already learning, already preparing for whatever challenge came next.